I'm going to take roll call attendance. So from Alford, Lucy Prashker, that's me. Charles Kitchen.
Here.
From Egremont, George McGurn.
Present.
Tom Burkle.
Present.
Danelle.
Here.
Danelle.
Yep.
Oh, great. Welcome. Great Barrington, Steve Bannon.
Present.
Deb Phillips.
Yes, here.
Great. Peter Taylor. Okay, I just sent him an email. Monterey, Don Coburn.
Here.
John Silbert.
Here.
Laura Rodriguez.
Hello.
New Marlboro, Jane Burke.
Here.
Great. And Tara White.
Here.
Sheffield, Bonnie Silvers.
Here.
Lucy.
Yeah.
You missed
It's
Susan.
good. From New
Oh, I'm
Marlboro.
sorry.
That's all right.
Got you now. Sheffield, Bonnie Silvers.
Here.
Nadine Hover.
Here.
Colin Smith. Okay, Stockbridge, Patrick White.
Here.
Sean Stephen. Nick Fredsel. West Stockbridge, Roger Kavanaugh.
Here.
Marie Ryan.
Here.
Molly Thomas.
Here.
Great. So, welcome to board members. Welcome to guest attendees. We've got, looks like really solid attendance tonight. Looks like we've got about 70 plus attendees. We're using a Zoom webinar format tonight, which is a bit new to us and maybe new to some of you. As many of you know, we've had 2 Zoom bombings, both of which were quite graphic and inappropriate. And because these are open meetings, our options for increasing security are somewhat limited. The best option, and the one that is used by many other municipal boards, including Great Barrington Select Board, Berkshire Hills School Committee, and others, is this webinar format that we've moved to tonight. And with this webinar format, only people who are designated as panelists are on the screen and have the ability to control, and I'm sorry about the phone, have the ability to control whether they are muted. So the panelists tonight, for guest attendees, the panelists tonight include our 8 town planning board members. And if you could just raise your hands so the guest attendees can see who you are. Our 2 superintendents. Is Beth on? Yes? Okay, great. So Beth and Peter are on. Our union representatives from both Berkshire Hills and Southern Berkshire, if you could raise your hands. And then Jake Eberwein, our project manager, and his team, if you all could raise your hands. Great. And then, of course, Mary Budson, who's our administrative support. Although we can't see the faces of our guest participants, we can see that you are here. We can see the names under which you joined the meeting. We've disabled the chat function, which has now become customary in public body meetings because the chat can not only be distracting, it can easily lead to open meeting law violations. If we have time at the end of the meeting, we will take some questions, but we are going to need to stay roughly within the 2-hour plus meeting time designated and scheduled. Your questions and comments, and I'm speaking primarily to the guest attendees right now, are very important to us. And if we don't get to them tonight, or if they occur to you later, we encourage you to send them in. And there are two ways you can do that. One is by going to our website, 8towns.org. And at the bottom of every page on our website, there is a Contact Us button that provides a place to send a message. And it also provides a place for you to sign up for emails from us, which I encourage you to do. The second way to get us questions is by sending an email to 8towns rsdpb@gmail.com. And that's obviously a bit harder because you have to remember the acronym for the Regional School District Planning Board, which isn't easy. So if you have trouble remembering that acronym, just use the website. All you have to remember is 8towns.org. Go to the website, go to the bottom of any page, click on the Contact Us button, and you can send us your message through the website. If you do send in questions, please be patient on getting a response. Some questions may be answerable now. Others may have to wait until we're further along in our deliberations. I want to assure you that we are cataloging all questions and comments for the board's consideration, and we will do our best to respond to all questions either individually or for those questions that are frequently asked, likely in a frequently asked question format, which we are in the process of developing. So those are the housekeeping comments I've got. I'd like to move on to the minutes. We've got two sets of minutes for the board to consider for approval, one from February 7 and another from February 9. I would like to suggest that we delete from the minutes, the draft minutes that have been sent to us, the names or other identifiers of community members, which Mary very dutifully included on here, but because we don't really know whether the name under which people zoomed in is the actual attendee, and also because there's appear to be some cell phone or other numbers on this list, I suggest we not include that listing in our draft minutes, and I would ask that we remove those identifiers from the minutes once approved. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of February 7.
So
I'll move it.
Deb moved, and who seconded?
John.
John, thank you. Any discussion on these minutes? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to take a roll call vote. Charles Ketchum,
Yes.
George McGurn,
Yes.
Tom Burkle,
Yes.
Danelle,
Yes.
Steve Bannon,
Yes.
Deb,
Yes.
Peter Taylor, have you joined?
Yes.
Great. And is that a yes on the minutes?
Yes.
Great. Don Coburn, John Silbert.
Yes.
Yes, Ron Coburn, yes.
Great, thank you. And John was a yes. Laura,
Yes.
Jane Burke,
Yes.
Tara,
Yes.
Susan.
For the February 7th meeting, I abstain. I wasn't there.
Okay. Bonnie,
Yes.
Nadine,
Yes.
is Colin on?
Yes, and yes, I approve of the minutes.
Great, thank you. Patrick,
Yes.
Sean, Nick, Roger,
Yes.
Marie,
Yes.
and Molly.
Yes.
Great. Okay, let's move to the February 9 minutes. Again, I'd ask that we strike the community member identifiers from the minutes when finalized. May I have a motion to approve these minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. That was Nadine making the motion and John seconding. Any comments? Okay, I'll call for a vote on these. Charlie?
Yes.
Lucy's a yes. George?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Danelle?
Yes.
Deb?
Yes.
Peter Taylor?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
John Silbert?
Yes.
Laura?
Yes.
Don?
Yes.
Jane?
Yeah.
Tara?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
Nadine?
Yes.
Colin?
Yes.
Bonnie?
Yes.
Patrick? Patrick? Roger?
Yes.
Marie?
Yes.
Molly?
Yes.
Okay, thanks a lot. All right, so next on the agenda is a process overview, which I've prepared. Most of the planning board members know much of what I'm going to present, but I thought it important to the now 83 guest attendees that we have that tonight's presentation be put in some context in terms of our process. So I am going to open up that presentation and share it with you all. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we are now proudly into our second year. And so I thought we should do just sort of a brief retrospective and run through the timeline. Jake always has very cool images that go with his presentations. So I thought I would give it a try. Not sure I will do Jake justice, but I wanted to start with an image that showed that our study had just turned 2. And so this is what I came up with, which I thought was cute.
I think we're actually in our 3rd year, aren't we?
Well, we're going into our 3rd year, but we just turned 2. And this is an image of a 2-year-old up against some books.
Very nice.
Thank you. I was worried it might not be quite serious enough and didn't reflect the wisdom and great maturity of our board. So I tried this one on for size, which I thought captured the maturity. Maybe I overshot a bit on this one, but the solitary figure really didn't convey the collective commitment of our 24-person volunteer board to take on what has proved to be a really difficult and complicated task. So here's my 3rd try.
Not Sisyphus, I hope.
Well, you got it, John. I thought I was getting closer, but still not quite right. And much too corporate, although I did sort of like the promise of the morning sky in the background there. So I can't match Jake. I'm going to leave the PowerPoint presentation image selection to Master Eberwein and just get down to some business. How far up this challenging mountain have we managed to get in the past 24 months? Our board has invested a tremendous effort over the last 24 months. We've had 19 full board meetings. We've had 79 subcommittee meetings for a total of 98 planning board meetings to date. And this all during the pandemic. In 2020, we organized ourselves with each of the 8 towns selecting 3 members to serve on the planning board. We formed subcommittees. We secured our first state grant. We engaged a facilitator, and we engaged the first set of our consultants for the beginning phase of our work. And those were the Massachusetts Association of Regional Schools and the New England School Development Council to help us with enrollment figures. We did an analysis in 2020 of the districts as they are now, known as the baseline studies, which included projections if there was no change to the current model of operation. So if you go on our website and you look for the MARS and NESDEC reports from October and November 2020, those are the baseline studies. What the districts are doing now and what our projections are if we not make any changes to the current models of operation. We looked at enrollment, we looked at financial and operational, we looked at buildings, we looked at the collective bargaining agreements, and we did some preliminary analysis of the district's similarities and differences. That was in 2020. The end of 2020, the board determined to continue the study with a deeper dive of what might be possible. And we worked to secure additional funding for that work, which took us through 12/31/2021, and then got some additional state funding that brings us through June 30, 2022 with our work. We evaluated, selected, and engaged our current research team, formerly known as the Task Force. Its new name is Berkshire Educational Resources K-12, or BERK. And that team has our project manager. We engage them to do work in educational feasibility, financial operations, a survey, and to help us with community outreach. We also engaged a second consultant group, Hanover Research, to help us evaluate educational feasibility issues. We approved the project manager's work plan to consider 3 possible options: full pre-K through 12 regionalization, merger of just the high schools, and formalized collaboration. We constructed our website and we began to develop a community outreach plan. So then the work began in earnest in June of 2021, bringing us up to today, and developed were 15 separate research reports, all of which are posted on the 8towns.org website. Jake's team did the lion's share of those. Hanover produced 1 report called District Restructuring. Again, they're all up on the website. Jake's team made 14 separate presentations to our board and subcommittees. We conducted 3 community surveys, 1 of students, 1 of district staff, 1 of community members, and some focus groups were conducted by Jake's team. There was a parent session held at Southern Berkshire Regional School District, and the community outreach efforts have been ongoing. We recently developed 3 relatively short fact briefs, which have been posted to the website, and I encourage everyone to take a look at those. So where are we today? What's happening today? The research team is going to be presenting models for the 3 identified options, together with their recommendations for a preferred option. What will follow in meetings to come is the 8-town board, the 23 members right now of the planning board, will consider and probe those recommendations during facilitated discussions that will include not just the superintendents, but designated union representatives, many of whom are on the call tonight. The 8-town board will likely vote on whatever next step it determines is appropriate in May or June and report to the 8 select boards thereafter. And our community engagement efforts are going to continue throughout. We have in the planning stage a community convening meeting that we hope we'll be able to schedule either late May or early June. In terms of the process ahead, I refer you to one of our short fact briefs. Our board has been following a process, but what I want to emphasize is that our board has no authority other than to make a recommendation to the select boards of the 8-member towns. That's the extent of our authority. Any decision to regionalize would be made by town residents at town meeting. And it is you, the town residents, who will have the final vote on the best path forward here. And with that, I'd like to turn the meeting over to the project manager, Jake.
Thanks, Lucy. I just gotta dial up the, dial up the presentation and we'll be good to go. Good evening, afternoon, I think, to everyone. It's good to see some of you and to be with many of you today. It's also good to know that I have a future in PowerPoint development if this doesn't work out. So today we're going to be running you through quite a bit of content, and we really appreciate the fact that you're here and interested and engaged in this process. What we'll be sharing today is really a summary, a synthesis of a report that we have written that basically meets the aims and expectations and promises that we had offered in our work plan some almost 9 months ago. The report is actually now posted. I posted it while Lucy was talking. So it's officially live on the website. I would hope you hang with my presentation for the next 45 minutes or so. But I do really want to encourage that what I have to say in the next 45 minutes or so is going to be really skimming the surface of what I think is a lot of depth in that report. And I really will encourage folks to go there and take the time to read through it. Again, I want to thank everyone for, again, being here and for the range of support we've had both at the town level, at the research level, at the state level. Everywhere we've turned, we've really gotten quite a bit of support. I have a dog who's quite aspirational in her stick gathering habits. And I would describe what we are up to as an 8-town community as very aspirational and visionary work. So the fact that you're here and interested in moving forward, the south part of Berkshire County is to be commended. So the report has quite a few pieces in it, and there's a lot of context and setup work, but then we really do go through a very structured process of looking at the models, ending with a set of arguments around a preferred model and recommendations, and then with some closing next steps for the board to consider. I'll be structuring the presentation today within these containers. And I know hopefully this will help folks who haven't been at the table an opportunity to have a little bit of context for the board. You know much of this context, so let's just jump in. As I said, one of my good friends, Ty Jackson, as many of you know, has a Reader Else campaign. He's a tremendous educator. And it's very important that you all know that I'm probably a much better writer than I am a speaker. And so I will not do justice what's in that report and the arguments the team has put together in this presentation. So really, again, encourage you to go and take a look at that. So our setup work. This entire process is driven by a very basic question. and that is, can the two school districts, Berkshire Hills and Southern Berkshire Regional School Districts, function better together or separately? It's really that simple. And if the answer is yes, then the follow-up question is, what is the best way to organize the districts in order to accomplish positive outcomes? So again, the question is together or apart. And the reality is it can work both ways. There's beautiful things that happen as a group, and there's beautiful things that happen as individuals. But ultimately, it's really about the vision and thinking about where you all want your community to be, how you want to support your children, how your children will feed your local region and your economy, and really ultimately creating the best possible place to support each other, your kids, and your community. As I say, it's a call to action. The board, which Lucy has already reviewed, I put this slide in, but just really, again, wanted to acknowledge the many volunteer hours that have gone in to these individuals in supporting the work over the last 2+ years. I'll be very clear, I'm paid for this work, and I appreciate that I'm paid, but these folks are doing much of this work, all of this work for free, and for that, I thank you. The mandate of the board, we've used this slide throughout the last 9 months pretty consistently, is really to study the potential of establishing a regional school district and the options which we'll be reviewing, estimating potential costs and educational impact, and then reporting those findings to the select boards. Ultimately, it's really about developing community-informed solutions to the challenges that your region faces. And again, I'll just reinforce that, community-informed solutions that address the challenges. So what are those challenges? Very simply put, decline in enrollment, rising operational costs, flat state revenue, that's money that we get from the state to support the schools, which is resulting in additional burden or fiscal liability to the towns. And all that has an impact on the ability of schools to offer a comprehensive, diverse range of programs and services. Again, as Lucy pointed out, the board has been studying the feasibility of some form of regionalization to address these challenges. And you community members, folks who reside, live, work, and go to school, will ultimately have the final vote on what is the best future for your educational system. I put this backdrop on very intentionally, this electrograph of COVID, specifically just to call out the fact that it's pretty astounding that all this work has occurred with this overlay of a really complicated problem that our schools and our communities have been, and actually even our families have been grappling with. So again, I really do appreciate the ability to move, that this work has moved forward in light of all that. Success measures really boil down to improving access and diversity of programming, thinking about new ways to collaborate and offer additional programming. Again, maintaining and honoring the identity of our towns and our school districts, reflecting practices that are appropriate for age groups and age span, engaging community stakeholders, and creating economies of scale. Again, encourage you to go to the website. You know, the website has a lot of content on it. I know it's sometimes that can be a little overwhelming, but if you go up to the resource link up here, which I have circled, you'll see there's some key reports. If you're not into reading reports, you can look at some of the presentations, which I think do a nice job of synthesizing the work that we've been at. Again, also on the website, as Lucy pointed out, there's a lot of drop boxes. We really encourage your questions and comments, and I mean that seriously. Throughout the 9 months, we've had a lot of questions asked that we wouldn't have considered, and we appreciate that in guiding, in informing the work forward. We want to hear from you. So our research team and findings. We have an extended research team. I can't thank the individuals who are on the line with us today. The top several of these individuals, myself, Mary Nash, Ken Rock, Sarah Carlton, Rob Putnam, Frank Cody, and most recently Matt Abrahams have just been instrumental in helping to put all this work together, and I can't thank them enough. But we've had a lot of other folks across the state, in some cases volunteering information towards this, and we just wanted to make sure we called out this extended team. I also should really acknowledge both school districts, both school superintendents who've really been incredibly responsive and helpful in all that we've done. Our goal as we work through the regionalization process is to move forward in a planning process, data analysis, outreach to the community, and modeling, so that we can continue to move forward in the regionalization process. I'll be describing a little bit later. For research questions that drove this process, fairly simple, is can some form of collaboration or regionalization improve education, improve finance, create operational efficiencies, lead to a spirit of collaboration and innovation rather than competition, increase inclusion and equitable access for all students, and ultimately improve district capacity. We'll be talking a lot about the models today, so I won't go too deep into them right now because we're going to hit them pretty hard in a minute. But there are 3 basic models that we were asked to look at: full regionalization, combining of the high schools, and formal collaboration. We had additional considerations around thinking about school unions or cost center models, career vocational technical ed, choice and tuition, and then use of facilities. Our broad tasks, again, I'm repeating myself a little bit, but is data analysis, educational feasibility, looking as closely as we could at operations, doing a survey and focus groups, and then evaluating the options, which we'll be doing today. Ultimately, our deliverable is this report, which you are getting today, which is hopefully giving you enough information to consider moving ahead with a preferred model, or at least enough information to have a pretty good discussion and debate about it. Our work plan has been posted. Again, folks can go back to that. I felt really good when I was reviewing that over the last week, and what we've delivered to you all, I think we got it done. Our products, as Lucy pointed out, are all on the website. I will be posting this PowerPoint when we are done today. Unfortunately, there's some animations that I've got to take out in order for you to see the slides. So I'll take those animations out after I deliver this, and then I will post that as a PDF. And these will all be live links, or you can go to that resource pages and get to these many reports. So some of our assertions as a team: we used our best judgment throughout this process, which is a combination of experience, examination of data, research. We did our best to look at trends and patterns across data sets. We recognize, of course, that even though we looked distinctly at 3 models, one of my first presentations to the board, I explained that there's a lot of space between the models. And so the perfect solution might fall between the 3 models. But specifically, we were asked to look at these 3. There are some key pressure points we know exist as part of this work. They're not just part of your community, they've been part of the literature and part of every regionalization effort to do this sort of work, whether it's transportation time, school closure, job loss. Those are all things that folks are very, very attentive to and sensitive to. We use parameters. We call them assumptions at times, but they are parameters within the models. We have to set parameters in order to develop projections. And so we did that. The good news is that we have tools that allow the manipulation of parameters. And so we hopefully will be able to use these tools with the board as they want to change any of these. And then we worked really hard to compare data as an apples to apples set of comparisons. And that's sometimes hard to do when you're working with different finance sets and different reporting structures. Assertions B, we know that any sort of change at this level is incredibly emotionally charged. These are big changes at the community level in terms of identity and culture. We have a lot of information for you, but there's a lot more detail still to be had. We really do acknowledge that both school districts are working incredibly hard and doing really interesting work, and we don't want any of that to get lost in the recommendations that we're making. We use those successes to build forward. All the models have pluses and minuses. They're not all winners and they're not all losers. Again, this idea of working towards collaboration versus competition. We know this is going to be a process. We know a lot of what we're going to say today you've already heard and probably know. And we remain as a team very hopeful, very optimistic, and very open-minded. As I like to point out, we start with big picture ideas when we work on complicated problems. And we work from the left to the right, which is we do all that we can to learn about a situation and create baselines, develop data sets and models to project. And then we understand that going forward, there's a lot of detail work and implementation that has to happen. I put the star and the arrow in the middle because that's about where this process is at. We've done some big picture thinking and learning. These models help to give you a little bit more detail and the ability to hopefully move in a preferred direction. But there will be a lot of detail work and ongoing problem solving, regardless of what model you decide on going forward. So what have we found? In the February 9th presentation, I did an overview of findings. This is a pretty quick summary, and I'm not going to read every word. I'm just going to focus on sort of the big points, and these slides will be available. And I also would refer folks to the February 9th to get a little bit more detail. So we know for sure that enrollment's declining, is projected to continue to decline. There's a few snapshots on the right-hand side that illustrate this in terms of where the districts have been combined since 2000 to today, where they're projected forward. You're welcome to go into the enrollment report, look at the projection methodologies we used, look at the accuracy of the projection methodologies. None are perfect. No one can look in the crystal ball, but we do offer these for review. Second assertion is that the cost of operating schools is rising steadily while state aid is remaining essentially flat. This, of course, then transfers the fiscal burden to the local level, which is the towns and the local taxpayers. This is not a unique situation for South County. This is pretty much the way it's happening across Berkshire County and a lot of rural areas across Massachusetts that are losing students. The Cape is another example, the Pioneer Valley. I also wanted to point out, as I said in red here, Ken Rock did a masterful job of recently analyzing the early FY23 numbers, and it looks like we're pretty much trending in the same direction, even with current numbers or projected next year numbers. We believe that the districts have a lot in common. We've looked at the plans, at the data, at the student profiles, and we think that there's as much in common as we've seen. As I often say to people, there's probably more variation within districts, within system, than there is between. So we did really believe that was a strong finding. We know there's room for growth in both districts. And as someone who's led districts and been a principal and been a classroom teacher, there's always room for growth. And so we did a comprehensive review of the educational indicators, which we presented on February 7th, and the narrative is in the resource area, but we recognize that there's certainly room for improvement. We know that graduates need developed pathways that prepare them for both college and career, as we've illustrated also in our February 7th presentation. We know that while we send a lot of students off to college, many don't complete a degree. We know there's a high shortage of career vocational technical ed Chapter 74 programs in South County. And again, both districts are aspiring to offer additional early college and dual enrollment advanced placement courses to prepare students for college. Just piggybacking off of that, very specifically, we've talked about it. We did a long presentation on this. We know that career vocational technical education Chapter 74 programs are woefully lacking in South County as compared to Central County, Pittsfield, and North County. The numbers on the map on the left-hand side are the number of students who are enrolled in Chapter 74 programs in the 3 regions. The current school buildings are under capacity, and there are 3 school buildings that don't meet the Mass School Building Authority's highest facilities ratings. So we know we have room to move students between buildings, to consolidate. There's a facilities report which walks through this all for the community, and that'll be reflected in certainly in the recommendations we make forward. We actually believe that both of your organizations run relatively lean, although collectively between the 2 organizations there are operational redundancies and gaps that could be filled if there were one central administrative central office. So Ken Rock again did a series of presentations on organizational structures. This is one snapshot from that, which illustrates how potentially the 5 towns could come together in a single organizational model. We know transportation is a key point in any collaboration or regionalization model. This particular map, which is in our transportation report, each dot represents in effect a family which attends a particular school. We did some very broad analysis of transportation in terms of whether it would cost more, whether ride times would increase or decrease depending on how students were organized. We know there's been a long history of regionalization collaboration talks between the districts. Rob Putnam did an excellent historical analysis we encourage that you read. And again, many of these conversations have focused on recurring themes of educational quality, vocational education, declining enrollment, and fiscal constraints. Finally, we were fortunate to have Hanover do some work on looking at case studies around regionalization, consolidation. What are the lessons learned? Where are their pros and cons? And I did highlight in red just one particular statement that very important that stakeholders are part of this decision-making process. These processes have a high level of communication, which I believe the board is committed to and has been committed to and remains committed to. The survey, again, indicated that our community wants to learn more. There were certainly lots of things that were we found that were common across various groups surveyed, student, alumni, and community members, parents. And there were a lot of things that absolutely were aligned across the user groups. And then finally, just going back to the baseline study that the Abrahams group did, we know that as we project forward with finances, the ongoing challenge will be maintaining finance structures and keeping in check the ability or the assessments that are ultimately leveled out to the towns as a result of managing increasing costs and flat state aid. All right, so we're going to get into context a little bit. I just wanted to talk about the difference very quickly of regionalization versus collaboration. Very simply, regionalization as a concept is when 2 or more towns, municipalities join together to form a regional school district. Currently, there are 2 regional school districts in South County, Berkshire Hills, which is composed of 3 towns, and Southern Berkshire, which is composed of 5. If the 2 were to combine into a single regional district. It would be composed of 8 towns. Regionalization generally varies across the state. It happens by grade span. It happens K-12. There's a very lengthy section on regionalization in the report that I would encourage folks, again, review. It talks about benefits and challenges. There are a few reports that were written at the state level specific to regionalization in Massachusetts that provide additional context. Collaboration, in contrast, is when districts remain independent. They run independently, but they work across district lines in some sort of a collaborative way, either through a state-approved collaborative or through shared service arrangements. But again, the districts remain independent. So the advantages basically to regionalization are, again, this is this is summarized content that, again, there's a much longer, more comprehensive described list in the report. Things like economies of scale, standardized processes, larger professional culture for staff, for recruitment and orientation, increased cohort size students, that increases potential for diversity and experiences, expanded curriculum. And in collaboration, what you have is retention. Advantages are retention of your local board, local control. You have some economies of scale depending on what you decide to collaborate on. Districts remain operational, retain operational control. It's pretty easy to do. In fact, it's already happening. And there is some degree of standardization possible. The disadvantages, very simply, are in regionalization, you do combine your governance into a single board, so that could be perceived as a loss of control. There may be perceived differences in culture and identities across communities. Regionalization is challenging to do. It's going to require votes at all 8 towns to move positively in that direction. Obviously, there's lots of fear of change, of loss, of school closures, class size, job loss, and then there's transition costs. On the collaboration side, if you retain 2 districts, you retain organizational duplication. Collaboration is sometimes hard to sustain, not so durable. There's limitations to what you can do in terms of economies of scale. They're very susceptible to change, and ultimately it doesn't end up with systems being fully aligned across, for example, your 8 towns, curriculum, teaching and learning, and your professional culture. I put this slide in very intentionally because I want to really just emphasize that there's a lot of great collaboration and partnership occurring between the 2 districts. And more than anything, the 2 districts reach out to each other when they need to. And I think that that's really been something we've seen. In fact, we believe the South County in a lot of ways exists and functions as a single entity. But I just really wanted to make this point so folks understood that we do believe that there are aspects and evidence of a lot of really collegial work and support across the 2 districts in many situations. Finally, collaboratives. We're going to talk about collaboratives in a minute, but a collaborative is a very formal structure. There's about 25 across Massachusetts. Berkshire County is the only county in Massachusetts without a formal collaborative. And that may be because the sweet number for forming a collaborative, according to the Massachusetts Organizations for Ed Collaboratives, is 15,000 students. So you need to have a population size really and enough districts to support a distinct and separate entity. Our county in total is about that. So South County alone would not even be close to that number. So on to the models and scenarios. We're going to walk through these very carefully. There are 3 models, and there are scenarios within each of the models. Now you might ask, why do we choose scenarios? The models need descriptions and parameters in order for us to do the analysis. And so we created some scenarios, in some cases because we thought they were promising, other cases because we wanted to exercise them through. In some cases, you're eliminating scenarios because they just don't work. So the first model is full pre-K through 12 regionalization. All 8 towns become a single district. There are 3 scenarios. Second model is a shared high school. I want to be very clear that Model B is a regionalization model because you would be regionalizing your high schools and then you would retain some form of regional elementary schools. There are 2 scenarios we modeled for that. And then finally, collaboration, which is we retain our 2 districts independently, but we work together somehow. There's 2 scenarios we modeled for that. I'm going to give you a little detail on those. This is a schematic we'll be using throughout. Each of the big blue box represents a district. Each of the little black squares represents a school. Gives you an idea of about how many kids, how much money they spend. Model 1 is option A, full regionalization. You'll see that there is 1 blue box here, which indicates that if you go with this model, you end up with 1 district composed of all these schools and a couple different variations and about 1,800 kids. Model B is a merged high school. So you merge your high school, 9 through 12. And then you either have to merge your elementary schools or retain 2 independent elementary school districts. So what you end up with is a high school district and an elementary district, so 2 districts, or a high school district and 2 elementary districts, or 3 districts. And then the third model is collaboration, which can happen 2 ways. We modeled it through shared services, which are already ongoing, or through the formation of a separate entity called a collaborative. So, a lot of text on these slides. I'm not going to read them all, but and these will be available to you all. These grids are right out of the report. I really encourage you to check them out. So the 3 scenarios that we're running in full regionalization. Scenario 1 is that we would keep all the schools remained open and as they are currently structured, all 7 schools. Scenario 2, we would merge the 9 through 12 students into a single high school on the Great Barrington campus. And the third scenario is we merge both grade 9 through 12 in the single high school on the Great Barrington campus. Grades 7 through 8, currently at Mount Everett, would move to Du Bois. Grade 6 would move to Undermountain, and Mount Everett would, in effect, be closed for repurposing. All the elementary schools would remain as is. Those are the 3 scenarios we modeled. Model B, we ran it 2 ways. The challenge was to merge the high school. Once again, we merged the high schools. In scenario 1, same deal, combine high schools in a new high school on the Great Barrington campus. And then we retain 2 elementary school districts, one theoretically owned by Berkshire Hills, one theoretically owned by Southern Berkshire. So what you end up with is 3 districts. The second scenario, we do the same thing with the high school, but we make 1 collective elementary school district, K through 8. And then in the collaborative scenario, scenario 1, in Model C collaboration, scenario 1 was the formation of a formal collaborative, and scenario 2 was just ramping up shared services. We did think about some alternatives that could be applied across all the models. One is a cost center model, considering supervisory union structures or potential consolidation of elementary schools beyond what we've recommended. All right, so I'm going to show you just a snapshot here of what it looks like. You'll see on this particular grid, again, won't spend a lot of time. I just picked some big topics here. How many districts you have, how many schools, how many central offices, how many students, what happens to students and staff, what's your governance structure. I'm going to kind of click them all up. That's Model A, Model B, and Model C. And what you can see is the number of districts change here. In that model B, which is your high schools merge and you have 2 elementary districts, you actually end up with 3 districts. One thing I really want to illustrate here is that you have 7 schools right now, and there is only one model that reduces that, and that is model 3, in which we would merge the high school, transfer the 7th and 8th students and the 6th grade students, and ultimately, in effect, close Mount Everett. You can see how the central offices change, how the governance structure changes, and really what would happen to the students. I just wanted to point out that this plus down here is if a formal collaborative is created, it does have an additional organizational structure that's required. So a director, a staff, a board. So even though you have 2 districts, you do end up with an additional organizational structure in this model. All right, moving along. I wanted to just reinforce a few things before we get into the models. And these are things that I know folks are very, very concerned about or attentive to. And that is just a few assumptions that we put in. One is that transportation would be limited to no more than an hour for high school students on a bus. Job loss would happen through attrition, and we do talk about that. Each of these is described in much more detail I'm going to do right now in the report. Class size for the high school, when we look at balancing, was set at 20 and 22 as 2 different parameters. We did a quick elementary model that we did at 18 and 20. Grade configuration, we recognize the complexity of the fact that the 2 districts run different middle school models. When we moved the 7th and 8th to Du Bois, the idea was that those grade levels would feed into the high school in terms of differentiation of curriculum, pre-vocational work. And so the decision was made there to move 7th and 8th and 6th in an effort to figure out how we could potentially save money on a facility. High school construction, we know that Berkshire Hills is in the queue right now for a high school renovation construction project. We're not going to shy around it. It's a reality of the South County situation. They worked hard at it, and our my sense is that it's going to happen. We were very sensitive to the idea of school closure, particularly at the elementary schools. We know that that is something that folks are very sensitive to, and so we did work really hard to protect that. And then we did set some financial parameters. So the parameters, again, can be moved and changed, but you'll see some savings throughout this set of models we're going to present in just a minute. So we reflected salary parameters of 2 different levels, $50,000 and $70,000. Rather than going specifically at positions, we just did averages. We didn't reinvest savings. We have a lot of thoughts about that, with 2 exceptions. One was vocational teachers and expanding vocational programs in the new high school, and what is adding an additional set of compensation on for individuals who take additional duties in a combined district. It's important that you understand we didn't do any significant changes to elementary school personnel, special education, specialists, paraprofessionals. That really requires a much deeper look and an audit, I think, to get down to that level. So if anything, I'd say that our projections are somewhat conservative in some ways. Our operating assessments use foundational enrollment, and our capital assessments use property value, or EQV. So important news, which is super important. I want to make sure these are our team's recommendation. We have created a great set of tools, Matt Abraham's primarily, and that you all have full ownership to accept what we say, reject what we say, or modify what we say. It's ultimately your decision. We just want to really underscore that. Our team's recommendations are not the board's recommendations. They are our team's recommendations. So our evaluation system that we used, I'm just going to check my clock here, make sure I'm doing all right. Good. We use 2 evaluation systems. We use a very simple matrix, which we call the EASE impact matrix, identifying whether something is hard to do or easy to do, low impact or high impact. Clearly, you want to do the easy things that have high impact, and you don't want to do the hard things that have a low impact. Second thing we did was looked at 4 domains with overarching questions: educational quality, operational efficiency, finance, and feasibility. You can see the prompts that we use to drive those. Does the solution lead to equitable educational access, opportunities, and outcomes? I won't read them all. We have a series of questions that are in the report that are additional prompts that fit within each of these domains. And I hope what we've given the board and the community is also a set of tools that you all can use if you want to go through the exercise of actually using these tools to evaluate each of the models and scenarios yourself. This is certainly how we did it. So we're going to get into the models. Model A, again, full regionalization, 3 scenarios. All schools remain open. Grades 9-12 merge into one building. Scenario 3, grades 9-12 merge. Grades 7 and 8 merge. Again, I've got a grid that goes through all the very particulars of what each of these looks like. It's pretty much what you saw on the other grid, with one addition. I added transportation in here because I know that a summary grid like this is probably something that will be useful for folks to scan all this. It's a lot to take in. But we wanted folks to understand how transportation would potentially be impacted within each of the scenarios. So for example, if you were to keep all your schools open and become a single district, you might want to exchange high school kids across the 2 high schools with some programming. So in order to do that, you need some additional transportation, maybe some shuttle vans to move kids between the 2 high schools. All right. So you can see how we sort of tackled that. The second thing is I have a very extensive list of yeses and nos for each of the different models. This is a very quick sort of summary of advantages and disadvantages to each of the models. All of these, when you have a single region, for example, you can do things like align your calendars, your contracts, your systems. Your disadvantages, of course, is that you're moving kids from Mount Everett into a new building, which is going to be challenging. You've got a new governance structure. You've got to go through the regionalization process. So certainly while you have lots of advantages, you've got some challenges too. Our finance scenarios, we are estimating savings for the 3 scenarios of around $1 million for scenario 1, which would be combining of, in effect, the central offices and operational staff into a single operational center. Scenario 2, which is combining the 2 high school, would result in class size balancing with an estimation of savings running from about $1.5 to $2.1 million. And then scenario 3, which is the most aggressive scenario that we present to you all tonight, with the middle schools, the 7th and 8th combining, would end up with a savings of around $2.3 to $3 million. We also put full-time equivalents in here. You'd have a sense of what changes to staffing include. Our evaluation of the models. You can see how we use the EASE impact scenario, and I'll have a synthesis at the very end. Anything in red we consider hard to do or low impact. Anything in yellow is sort of mid-range. Anything in green is a positive. It's high impact and relatively easy to do. We also set these within the 4 domains here. And we actually use a numerical scale to get to the colors: 0 to 2 for red, 3 to 5 for yellow, and 6 to 8 for green, meaning green is positive, yellow is moderate, red is a no-go. And you can see how these particular models showed up as positives, with the last 2 clearly having the highest potential for generating fiscal savings and improving educational quality. Model B, we'll run through that relatively quickly. You all know the architecture now. The two scenarios, again, are high school region in two separate elementary regions, or high school region in one elementary region. So you either end up with 3 districts or 2 districts, or high schools merge. And again, 3 school committees. And I think I made a mistake here. It should be 2 school committees. And then transportation, again, with that promise of limitations of 1 hour for high school students. Lots of advantages and disadvantages. The advantages to combining the high schools are the same advantages that we saw with combining the high schools in Model A. The disadvantages, of course, in something like running 3 different districts is just complete lack of alignment, additional redundant systems, regionalization times 3, because you won't just be regionalizing for your high school, you're regionalizing for 2 elementary districts too. So clearly that would offer some serious disadvantages. Our savings for these scenarios are fairly modest because in effect, you wouldn't have any savings out of the administrative staff. You wouldn't be combining your, you'd get some savings out of the high school combination. But scenario 2, obviously, which is where you have 1 elementary district and 1 high school district, saves you between around $500,000 and $1.1 million. And our evaluation of these is that we see that with the formation of 3 districts, that really low operational efficiency, really low financial impact. We see it is really unlikely that folks would want 3 districts. And so those are all rated low, where scenario 3 is a little bit higher because we could see the value in the combination of the high schools. And then model C is collaboration. Again, the 2 scenarios will form a collaborative or have additional shared services. Again, described. This would literally, scenario 1 would be the adoption and going through the state process of actually forming a collaborative, keeping in mind that earlier I said you need 15,000 students to make this happen. So it's, in our estimation, it's not likely. Obviously, shared services are much more likely because you're already doing them. And you would, in effect, keep everything pretty much as is, except you would be working on trying to, create some shared opportunities across the districts. Advantages and disadvantages. Obviously, I've already sort of expressed my bias about scenario 1 is not being realistic, so I'll just leave that one alone. But the disadvantages of 2, advantages are obviously it's already happening, it's going to be easy to do, it retains your governance. But the disadvantages are, as I said earlier, it's not what we would say is a durable a structure. Most collaborative arrangements are voluntary, so depending on who's in charge, what the school committee's preferences are, whether you have a fiscal crisis in a particular year and you want to continue forward, that could change. A shared service agreement could change in effect year to year. The savings are relatively modest, but I do want to keep in mind that we really projected the savings on just potentially consolidating 1 or 2 operational centers. And so, in effect, what you do is save a little bit by consolidating things like custodial or cafeteria or IT. And depending on how much you want to consolidate or share across the 2 districts, you could save more money. All right, evaluation of this. Clearly, scenario 1, we're not big fans of, so hard to do. I would say impossible to create a collaborative, in my opinion, without engaging the entire county. Finance outcomes are really low. Scenario 2 is more green, easy to do, you're already doing it. Feasibility is high. You'd say the financial ramifications are relatively low, maybe moderate. And you could potentially improve educational operational efficiencies to some degree, so low to moderate. Go over to the 4 domains. You can see how there's a little green on the feasibility. We see shared services, very feasible. But again, sort of in the mid-range around educational and fiscal impact. So we did additional considerations around supervisory unions, cost center financing, potentially closing of elementary schools. We add that as kind of an amendment after the evaluation of the 3 models. and we offer that up for review. We actually did some initial calculations on what it would look like if you close additional elementary schools. I will leave that to the report for you all to review because it's not what we're going to be recommending today. Summary of models and scenarios. So this is putting all the models on a particular grid. Again, in the report, you'll have time to look at it. I know for me, this is the way my brain works. It's not how everyone's brain works. So you'll see that this upper quadrant is the hard to do quadrant, but high impact quadrant. So we got lots of things that are going to be relatively hard to do, but will have a relatively good impact. But you'll see where they're placed in the quadrant also are important. So things like merging the high schools and having two elementary districts is going to be super hard to do. We see that as almost the hardest thing to do, along with forming a collaborative. Although we could see some impact to that because the merging of high schools would expand opportunities. And then the three regionalization options sort of run from easier to do to harder to do and lower impact and higher impact, but all in sort of the upper right-hand quadrant. And then similarly, if you go back to the four domains, you can see everything laid out nicely here for you in a summary table. Where there's green, it's good. Where there's red, it's not so good. Again, our evaluation, and I would encourage you all to sort of use your own good thinking and maybe apply this grid in a way that you think would be helpful to helping you think through these. But you can see that we really are falling pretty heavily right in this zone right here, which is a single region where the merger of either grades 9 through 12 or 9 through 12 and 7 and 8. Of course, we do see there being value in additional shared services, and we see educational value in the merged high school model, both of them. We just don't think it's necessarily a real feasible option. These are the summarized financials, and I got a lousy thing in the middle of the screenshot. Sorry about that. But I know, again, this is a lot to take in, but is what I showed you earlier. If you look at scenario 1, we did low end, or scenario 2, we did a low end range and a high end range. This is based on average class size of 20, average salary of 50,000, high end average class size of 22, higher salary at 70,000. So you can save more or less depending on how big you want to make your classes and how much you're going to save in terms of potential salaries. So each of the models is laid out here, model A above, B here, and C here. Again, all this translates into assessments, which I know that folks are also very interested in. We use an assessment methodology, and I will lean on my team if we need to, in which we used foundation enrollment for FY22. We tied the capital assessments to property values, EQV. We evaluated debt service at 25 years, 3.25, and then we made a school choice adjustment. So this particular first assessment, and I want to really hammer home this point and make sure you hear this loud and clear. This is applying all the savings in the various models to the assessments, which is not anything we would recommend. We would expect that the assessments would be used both to enhance educational opportunities and programs for students and for the districts, and also to sort of control the assessment implications at the town level. But really, that's not our decision to make. You all will have to grapple with that decision of how much you want to reinvest and how much you want to sort of control costs at the town level. But each of the models here is demonstrated with what the assessments would rise or fall. And as you can see in the various models, we see a lot of green because we've been applying all the savings to the assessments, which means they would go down. Now, we did something which is a little provocative. We understand that, but we know that this new high school is on everyone's minds. And we made some assumptions. We can absolutely be challenged and changed, but we assume that a $100 million high school project would be constructed. That particular number was drawn from the last planning process, and I think I cited it in the report, in which a figure between $70 and $96 million was cited. We applied a 6% regionalization reimbursement from the MSBA. So for folks who may not know, the Mass School Building Authority provides partners with communities to build schools, and they come up with a reimbursement rate based typically on the wealth of the community. However, they have a lot of incentives that they build into the formula. If you build a green school or use a particular project management style, you can get more reimbursement. One of the additional reimbursement incentives is that if you are forming a new region, which you would be doing potentially, you get up to additional 6% reimbursement from the MSBA. We ran 90-10 split between Berkshire Hills and Southern Berkshire. We did that for a variety of reasons, which are described in the report, but one of the main reasons just simply is that Southern Berkshire has a perfectly fine high school right now. And so obviously partnering on the construction of a new high school would need to really be a value proposition that wouldn't be a heavy burden additionally on their communities. And then the Berkshire Hills assessments reflect the revised regional agreements with the capital assessment adjustments. And so based on that, as many of you know, there was an adjustment from Barrington in effect to Stockbridge. So this is with the new high school, all the savings applied, and how the different models would play out in terms of assessments. We have lots of backup to this that we're happy to review. Probably would make sense to review this mostly at some point at the finance subcommittee level. So on with the punchline. We recognize that there's a lot of competing tensions in any communities that are thinking about joining or collaborating together. An example of this is this wonderful graphic that Ken created for us, which is this idea between local control and regional collaboration, multiple central offices, one central offices, and really thinking about where you fall in that continuum. That can be applied to finance, can be applied to educational systems. But ultimately what we know is that change is happening in South Berkshire. And we believe that you all have the potential to direct this change rather than simply being impacted by it. This particular graphic displays that. On the left-hand side are things that are happening: declining enrollment, competition for students, flat state aid, limited opportunities, particularly in the area of vocational, duplication of services. On the right-hand side is what happens if you come together, share resources, expand opportunities, strengthen your economy, promote a legislative agenda. These are things that we think that you can manage and control. So our preferred recommendation is A2, which is that you all think about forming a single K-12 region composed of 8 towns that merges your high school, 9 through 12, in a newly constructed building on the Great Barrington campus. Our arguments for that, again, drawn out in the report in a little bit more detail, but there are 5 points we just want to make. One is we believe that having a single regional 8-town administrative backbone helps you to align and cohere systems, curriculum, operations, educational advantages, contracts, staffing across your systems. We believe that you'll be able to expand programs in great part for your high school students through vocational education. We're recommending 6 to 8 programs be added. Electives, both high schools have incredibly rich pools of elective courses, and I keep thinking to myself, if you simply just put those 2 sets of courses together, make them available to everyone, you've expanded the set of electives available to all students. Enrichment opportunities. We believe that savings generated can and should be reinvested in educational programs, whether that's expanding early childhood, after-school programming, additional services to support students with particular needs. An advantage of what we're presenting as a recommendation is that your elementary schools remain as is within a single K-12 region, which allows for a lot of alignment across your elementary systems. And I think one of the most important points that I see in 5 is that allows you all to build something together, to come together and create a vision and really shape a combined 8-town culture from a 3 and a 5-town culture to an 8-town culture. The disadvantages, of course, are many, but the challenges, I should, are many. One is that regionalization is going to be really hard. And so you've got a lot of work to do. It's going to be a change in governance. You're going to have to come up with a fair assessment plan. Obviously, we've given you some ideas today on how that can happen. Your current high school staff and your students will be moved. And to realize savings, you're likely going to be balancing class sizes into slightly higher classes than you currently have. We see many opportunities, and I shared this slide in the last presentation. I want to point out, though, that our team is not in the position, or do we feel it's appropriate for us to tell you where the opportunities should be invested. We know for sure you can't do all this stuff. And so you're going to have to go through really a priority setting process. But we think there are a lot of places where additional opportunities for expanding educational programs and services and experiences and outcomes for kids are possible, whether that's, again, expanding early childhood, cohering your professional development system, recruiting and supporting teachers, sharing instructional technologies. You can see these here. The financial implications summarized are up on the slide here. Basically show you that the savings for Model A2, which is single region, high schools merged 9 through 12, between $1.5 and $2 million. We just gave you a little bit more detail on the calculations for your assessments by town. So I want to make a few points as we close this out. Actually, we're going to get to one other piece then. I'm sorry. I think I'm still doing okay. Let's see. Yeah, we're perfect. Great. So I want to just really illustrate that this is not the end of the fiscal story and your ability to advocate. What you all would be attempting to do if you decided to do this would be a first of its kind in the Commonwealth. This is a unique project. It is in effect the creation of a super region. And so our expectation, and this has actually been written in reports by the state auditor, by the Rural Commission, by DESE, who's looked at barriers to regionalization, that they have to offer incentives and be thinking more creatively and innovatively about how to encourage this really hard work. And so we think it's a great opportunity to make some concrete asks from the state, whether that's regional bonus aid, the guarantee of 100% transportation aid, additional incentives for capital debt that's outstanding, particularly in South Berkshire, and funds to continue the planning and transition, which will occur over the next 2 to 5 years. We do think it's a real opportunity to bring additional funds into the state to do something that is an incredibly innovative project. We know that Berkshire Hills has been accepted into eligibility, and we know that the high school building is a big variable in this deliberation. I define it as an important factor. They'll be heading into eligibility. That's going to start on August 1, 270 days to do a variety of things. What I really wanted to call out here, and I've shared this with the board before, is that the Mass School Building Authority construction project in the regionalization process do have overlaps. And there is an opportunity that happens in the Mass School Building Authority project where districts shape their educational vision and plan for their new facility. And it just so happens that the same thing is expected to happen in regionalization when you're forming a new region. We see these two processes really marrying together at a really unique moment in time. So if you were to choose this option, what would you do? I think it's, again, an incredible opportunity to come together in 8 towns, develop an educational vision that would really be supporting the construction of a new high school, really dig deeply into the visioning around career vocational technical education with your community partners. We gave you, I think, 10 possible shops. We intentionally gave you 10. We didn't give you 6, we gave you 10, based on labor market data, interest, and things that we argue in the paper. But we know that that's got to be thinned down, and that is really up to your community to make that decision. You've got to lean into beginning to think about the development of a regional agreement and a governance process. And then you need much more analysis, ongoing analysis with things related to like transportation, special education, and more financial modeling. Ken put together sort of a best case possible scenario. This is probably incredibly accelerated, but what we know is that the next year and a half to 2 in Berkshire Hills will be spent preparing and planning for a new high school, and the regionalization process also requires that you're working both with the Department of Education and with your towns to ultimately get to a vote. We see the vote the earliest in 2023, potentially even further out. But then once a vote occurs, you have really between a year and 2 to really create a transition plan. And you, in effect, you create a transition school committee that is supported while the existing school committees continue to function. Then at some point, you launch the new district and move into your new step. So a lot more information here that the board can talk through if and whether you decide to go this route. So the backup plan. So I like to come with a backup plan. As someone who's a runner, we have an A goal and a B goal. And so the backup plan is to potentially think about expanding through formal agreements, shared services between the 2 districts. And I really want to make sure that folks understand that this is not our preference, but we also believe that there's a lot of great will happening right now between the 2 districts should be capitalized on. This is in effect model C2, which would be expansion of shared services. So it's already happening. We have a full inventory in the report. We can't commend the 2 districts enough. This often happens at the superintendent and business administrator level where they just figure things out. They share transportation, they share staff at times, they support each other in really unique ways, purchasing products and insurances together. So we know it's already happening. We think it would be a step in the right direction if you couldn't get to regionalization, but we just want to be clear that we don't believe that it goes far enough in aligning your system in a way that really generates the most significant educational and fiscal value. So in the report, I said, if you're going to do this, promise me one thing, or maybe commit to one thing, 2 things actually, in effect. Take 2 bold steps. And rather than more planning processes around nibbling around the edges, around potential shared services, go full in and commit that you can do something hard. And these 2 hard things that we're recommending are align your school calendars and your high school bell schedules. If you do those 2 things, you can actually begin to think about sharing staff, sharing courses, and sharing experiences across the schools. And then secondly, commit to the consolidation of at least one operational system. That'll help you to figure out how you can work together, how you might think about saving money and sort of aligning systems. And so if you did these 2 things, I think successfully, I think it would really go a long way to demonstrating that shared services is a viable option for the community. So the next steps, if you were to go with Plan B, would be to put together a cross-district shared services committee, do needs assessments. We'd like to see, I would recommend that it gets adopted as policy with a shared services agreement that's written with timelines, expectations, outlines, goals, reporting structures, and deliverables. Again, this is all laid out in more detail in the report. So we are just about at the end. My final thoughts are, this is all hard and change comes with a really deep social and emotional impact. As I'm sure many of you are experiencing probably right now. in terms of hearing some of this stuff said out loud. All the models have gains and losses. They have risks. They vary by district, by town, and by stakeholder group. There's different audiences that have different and competing priorities at times. And we recognize that the formation of a new regional district will be an extensive negotiation process that will need to involve everyone who will ultimately make the decision. We know this is going to be incredibly hard. It has the potential to be unbelievably remarkable work and will have an effect for generations to come. So with that said, we just close with just reinforcing the fact that we all come to the table with the same intent and aspirations, and that is that we want what's best for our kids. And I think what this process is all about is exploring the best way to get there. So the decision is yours, and we really do appreciate you listening today and being very patient with a lengthy, somewhat substantive presentation. Thank you.
Jake, that's a beautiful sunrise you got there.
Yeah, I do. Thank you. I want to make sure that folks know where the website is. Again, I'll leave this up, but I can pull it down, Lucy, at any time if you want to engage in the last part of the meeting today. We've left some time too, haven't we?
Yeah, I think you should pull your shared screen down.
Okay, great.
And I would like to begin just by thanking you for that presentation, the massive effort that went into the presentation and the massive effort that has gone into the report behind the presentation and your work over the last 15 months or so. It's a bit, no, 9 months. 9 months. You know, you said that you get paid for the work, and you do. But what members of the planning board may not know, and members in the audience not know, is you get paid for a fraction of the work you actually do on this. And you've just been putting in enormous hours, you and your team, above and beyond the commitment you made to the board. And we're very thankful for that and your commitment to this process. It really is extraordinary. So thanks to you and your team for delivering the deliverable you promised back in June of 2021 tonight. So we've got about 20 minutes left on the 2-hour mark. What I'd like to do is give folks on the board an opportunity to ask questions that they would like you to work on getting them answers to by our next meeting, because we're not going to have time to go through all the questions tonight. But I think what's incumbent on planning board members between now and April 5th, which is the time we've scheduled for our first deliberation on the report and your recommendation, is to read the report, to go through the presentation again, the written presentation, and to make sure they're armed with the information they need to participate in the deliberations that are going to follow. So I would like to open the floor to board members. If there are any questions that you'd like to pose to Jake and team tonight, not for answers tonight necessarily, but for additional information you'd like to see before our next meeting on April 5th. I know it's hard to do, given that you haven't read the report yet, so you don't know what it is that's in there. But if there is sort of an area that you'd like Jake to point you to get more information, I think this is a good time to do that. So, Colin, I see your hand is up. Go ahead.
I just wanted to ask about what Berkshire Hills is doing with their building project, and that fits into the timeline and the decisions we have to make, or does it not not matter at all what we decide. Because my sense is that if we decide to move forward with this, then that would affect the building size.
Jake, you want to? Yeah, please.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy, and I'm not going to put Peter on the spot, but he's welcome to jump in too. So we absolutely talk quite a bit at length in the report about right sizing the high school. And so you do have to make that decision. You know, Monument is, I believe, slated to build a high school of somewhere in the neighborhood of around 540 or so. We're suggesting it's either going to be a 540 student high school or it's going to be a 700 plus high school. The ability to right size it, get additional funds, expand the programs and spaces within to support the students is important. Now, you're asking me about the timelines. The timelines, I believe, based on when Berkshire Hills would be eligible to apply for capital, is going to be somewhere in late 24, 25. So we actually do think there is some time for these two processes to converge and overlap. And because this really is a visioning process, the idea of building something together, we think this potential marriage of these two processes is going to be very important. But you are correct, Colin, that in the next, in effect, year, they'll likely have to certify enrollment with the MSBA, which will drive the size of the project. I would suspect that the state will have some degree of flexibility in having a conversation, but at the same time, I want to be really careful and respectful of the amount of work that Berkshire Hills has put in since 2008. It's all chronicled in the report in getting their high school, and we want to make sure that we also don't risk their process moving forward.
Does that answer your question, Colin?
Yeah, thank you, Jake.
Yeah. Bonnie?
Thank you. So a couple of things. One, I followed along. Thank you so much for putting up the report right away, Jake, because I followed along as you gave the report. And as you said, I commend everyone to take the time to read all of, now I know why you were not sleepless in each of our meetings saying you've been dedicated to this. A couple of questions that hopefully you could address at our next gathering. Obviously, you didn't have all of this information, but the whole designation of Mount Everett as a wall-to-wall early college high school. How do you, if you can look to how this might impact any of the decisions, or how you would weave that in for our next gathering, if it's appropriate. And the other thing is, you championed what I have, the two actions, so this is very self-serving. Bell schedule and calendar have been a simple fix, my saying, for a decade. So I appreciate the whole idea of, can we do something simple and concrete? And I think it would be very powerful. So I just want to thank you, Jake, for all the work, and hopefully you can get us some information on my question. Thanks.
Thank you, Bonnie. Jane?
I had a question about the construction cost, given that it's not happening until 2025. Are those numbers based on assumed inflation, or are they on today's costs? I'd be interested to see how realistic the numbers are.
Yeah, I mean, I ran the top end of their range, which likely that range was, I believe, cited like pulled it out of a meeting from 2021. So clearly it doesn't reflect, if anyone's doing any construction or going to Home Depot these days, you know what's happening in the construction field and inflation. So clearly we chose $100 million as a way for you all to have an idea of what the impact would be. That is not a number that anyone but our team came up with based on what we had as backup. And so a lot of work would still need to be done to figure out exactly what the costs are going to be.
Thank you.
Okay. Not seeing any more hands. So I'm going to move forward on the agenda. Subcommittee reports. I don't know if there are any subcommittee reports, but I put them on here as a placeholder. Deb, maybe you want to give us an update on educational quality?
But the real update on educational quality is that we haven't completely finished the negotiation with Hanover, but we have one more project that they will be working on, and it is going to be some case studies of the wide variety of innovative and visionary ways school districts are pursuing school to career pathways. And so we're looking forward to having some more information about options for ways to support all of our students moving forward, so that as we make decisions about how we want to pursue that, we have a broader range of information. So that's my Education Quality Committee update. And we're excited that report should be done by May 23rd. So we'll have information after that. Thank you.
Thanks, Deb. Roger, do you have anything for finance?
Nothing to report tonight.
Thank you, Roger. George, do you have anything for operations?
Yes, I do, Madam Chairman. Thank you. The operations subcommittee, most of whose members participated tonight, will, as is our tradition, I'll request Mary send out a doodle poll tomorrow so that we can meet in the near future to discuss this. I would like to say that, as Jake intimated, both in our operations subcommittee meetings and in minutes that we adopted this evening, the transportation report was directed at the operations subcommittee. And we're watching that very, very closely. And as a corollary to that, I just want to say that one of the things that I did find uncomfortable this evening was the assumption that flat state aid would continue. And I find that first of all, dubious, but also really unacceptable, particularly in the area of transportation. I guess the other thing I'd like to say is they're just shy of 100 people who continue to participate in this meeting tonight, community members. And I think that's wonderful. They stay here. It was a lot for people following this closely for 2 years to keep up with everything this evening. And so I really appreciate the stakeholders and community members that continue to be with us tonight. So thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thanks, George.
Can I just make a quick comment?
Sure, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to point out that I mentioned in the presentation that Ken Rock we actually worked with the Department of Ed over the last month to run projections based on the FY23 current numbers, just to make sure that our finance projections were holding with what the districts are facing. I think there's some assumption that the Student Opportunity Act is going to infuse communities with a lot of money, and there is a lot of money going out through Student Opportunity Act, but not necessarily to districts like Berkshire Hills and Southern Berkshire, or others in Berkshire County for that matter, with the exception of Pittsfield. So Ken, in the report, I have a very short summary of Ken's work, but then I have a link to his full report, which is not overly long. It's about 12 pages. I encourage folks who are interested in thinking or looking at the FY23 projections and like that sort of thing to check it out. He did a great job.
Thanks. Danelle, I see you've got your hand up.
Sorry, I couldn't get that up during the time you're asking for questions from us.
No problem.
Just a quick question. Is there going to be a time where we can do this again, but where the community members could talk or ask questions or share ideas? I know a lot of them came on hoping that they might be able to do that, but have not. So is there another time where this could happen?
Yes, absolutely. We're planning as I said, I think in the beginning, we're planning a community convening meeting or meetings that's in development, which will be devoted pretty much entirely to hearing from the community. We may also have, and this is all under discussion by the Community Outreach Subcommittee. We're meeting on Friday, and welcome everyone on the planning board to get us your thoughts before then. But we're working on developing other avenues for community input, including maybe smaller focus groups. And of course, we want the comments to come in emails and web posts, etc. I hope we're going to have a few minutes tonight to open up the floor to at least some community members. So in answer to your question, yes, there are going to be additional opportunities as we go through this process, but obviously there was a lot to cover tonight, and it was very important to get it all out on the table before our first facilitated discussion, which is going to happen April 5th. Anyone else? No report from community outreach other than our work is ongoing. Again, we've been meeting weekly over the last several weeks, and we'll continue to meet frequently until we've got sort of a good plan underway for getting that community input that you referenced, Danelle, and that we very much want. Okay, no project management subcommittee report. Peter Taylor, unless you can think of anything.
No, I just would say in response to Danielle's important point that what we have identified early on in this process, and Jake reflected in his presentation, is that this needs to be a community-informed process. We also identified early in this process that any change that we recommend really needs to be motivated by our shared belief that it's going to improve educational quality. And we need to form a vision for what that quality represents and how it will benefit our kids and our communities. And so the community outreach piece that is forthcoming is really important for those reasons, in terms of, yes, reacting and asking good questions on what we have done to date, but also looking forward to coming together around a shared vision that we can achieve utilizing one of these three options or something that we come up with together. And so I just want to underscore all the important points around community engagement and participation.
Thanks. Okay, so I think we can now move to the public comment portion of the agenda. And I'm going to open the floor up for public comments for the next 10 minutes to try and keep us on schedule. Again, I want to emphasize that this is just the beginning, and really encourage you to get your comments and questions into us over the website or through emails. And there'll be lots of opportunities for doing that. So just scrolling through. And I'm not actually seeing hands up. Are you Mary? Oh, I see one.
Valerie?
Valerie? You want to promote her, Mary?
Hello. Can you hear me?
Anne, welcome. Welcome.
Great. So I work at Monument. I'm a teacher there, and I just wanted to get student voice involved. The students really don't know a lot about what's going on. So next Tuesday, along with Andrew Rapport, I think his last name is, who is the National Honor Society advisor at Mount Everett, he and I are hosting a Zoom for the students, and we've sent you an invitation on your Contact Us platform on the website. We'd love to have any of you join us, just for the students to be able to get some idea of what's happening, and also if they have any concerns or even advice.
Wonderful. And I did see that invitation. Mary, can you mute Valerie? Here, I did it. I did see that invitation, and I think it's a wonderful opportunity to get the students together on a single call, and I hope it will be the first of many. So thank you for taking the initiative on that. And I understand Southern Berkshire is joining in that effort, which I think is great. I see Nadia's hand is up. Can you promote her, Mary?
Nadia, you should be able to take your, there you go.
Oh yeah, sorry, I was switching over, I guess, in the time someone said I could speak. Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of comment on what Valerie was saying. I guess maybe now over a month ago, it was actually before February break, Mount Everett's NHS had a meeting, and we kind of decided we wanted to just kind of let students know what was happening at Mount Everett, and also students at Monument, but we figured it was kind of important to get Monuments. Well, we were genuinely curious kind of to hear what Monument students knew and what they thought. So I'm glad that Valerie, you and Mr. Rapport finally connected. I was able to now, I think a couple weeks ago, join the Monument student government meeting and just kind of gauge opinion and talk to people a little bit. And I think it's a similar situation between both schools, where some people kind of know what's happening, but most kind of really needed from the ground up, an explanation of the possibility. And I thought perhaps people would be more familiar with it because of the survey back in, the fall, but it didn't really seem to be that way. So I'm glad that, especially when we're coming to a critical point like this, there's some collaboration happening about educating the students, because we are the ones that'll be our kids will be going to the schools, and we'll be living here when the changes is actually made. So even though it won't be our education, it'll be it's the future of South County. So, yeah, I think I'm glad, Valerie, that, this is finally happening. So.
Thanks, Nadia. Thanks for coming to the meeting and your active participation over the last several months. Really appreciate it. Eileen Mooney.
Okay, can you hear me? Because I've never used this before.
We can, Eileen. Thank you.
I have an easy question.
Sure.
When Jake was talking about an hour of transportation, is that one way or both ways?
That's one way.
Thank you.
Mark Carson. And then we'll get to you, Christine. Can we get Mark promoted, Mary?
Mark is promoted. Mark, if you'd like to speak, go ahead and unmute yourself. We should be able to hear you.
Sorry about that. Yes. Am I on now?
You are.
Okay. Back when I was in Mount Everett, they had building structures, and it was a very, hold on a second, I'm sorry. We had this building structures where all these young men that were on that, building homes and plumbing and electrical, most of those guys became contractors up today. And that course fell off many years ago, but I was wondering if that could come back and help out the contractors that are around here now, because they're always saying there's this very big shortage of, people that want to get into the field. And I think that would be a good thing if that can be part of this program going forward.
Thanks, Mark. Jake, do you want to speak a little bit to where Mark can go in your voluminous materials to see what's possible there?
Yeah, sure. There is a report on the resources page, Mark, that is the Career Vocational Technical Education report. And you're going to see in that report, we do outline the potential addition of 10 vocational Chapter 74 shops in the new high school. And among those reflected are the construction trades. Certainly carpentry is one of those areas, but additional could be other trades such as plumbing, electrical, HVAC, things of that sort. So I think ultimately there need to be a decision at the local level on where the highest demand are and which shops are likely to draw students, sustain enrollment, and obviously feed your local economy. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Christine.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention that yesterday, the Berkshire Hills Education Association and Southern Berkshire Education Associations had a meeting with a number of members to begin discussions together as teachers and support staff of what is being discussed here. So that's wonderful. I'm really happy about the student initiative that's going to occur next week and that they got together. And I just wanted to say that I hope that some of the forums that you conducted in the spring that included students and staff, that you come back and do that again, because there's a very different picture on the table at this point. And I think it's really important for all of us to have an opportunity to have a face-to-face with you in each district, maybe even in each school, as to the extent feasible, students, parents, and faculty. Thanks.
Thanks for that input. And definitely something I'm sorry, am I muted? No, okay. Thanks for the input. Definitely something that's on the table for an action plan. Wondering if we could, like with the students, start bringing faculty from both districts together in those focus groups and discussions, because I think it'd be really nice to have that combined group talking about these issues together. But I'm really happy and excited that it's off the ground already with the two educational associations talking directly. So that's great news. I'm not seeing anybody else. Mary, am I missing anyone else?
I don't see anyone else either, Lucy.
Okay, well, I'm glad we were able to get to the comments that folks had tonight, get through all those. There are going to be lots more questions and comments to come. We really want to hear from you. We're going to, as I said before, catalog all comments and questions asked. I do ask of my planning board members that we really make a commitment to each other and this process to read Jake report, page 1 to page 100 and whatever it is, Jake, and study it and be prepared to discuss at our next meeting on the 5th. We weren't able to get full participation on any of the dates we polled over the next 6 weeks, which was a little bit discouraging to me. So to the extent people said they couldn't make one or more of the meetings, whatever you can do to rearrange your schedules if you can, so that we can get as close to full participation at each of the facilitated discussions, that would be great. I know it's probably not possible to get all 23 of us, plus all of our union reps, plus the 2 facilitators, plus the school superintendents, free and available on the same day, but let's do the very best we can to get to as full participation as possible. Yeah, Jane, you have your hand up.
I'd like to make a request that we make an effort to have some in-person sessions. I think we're getting to the point where I, for one, would appreciate being in a room with some people. We might have to have small breakdown into small groups, whatever the facilitator says, but I'm feeling like this format is not as productive as it might be if we were in person. Thank you.
Thanks, Jane. I agree with you completely that it's always better to have facilitated discussions in person. I wish we could do that. The facilitators are not available to do these sessions in person, and that was a condition of their being able to attend. So that's not going to be possible during the facilitated discussions. I hope it will be possible once we finish up with them and are able to get together as a board again in May and June. That's my hope. But obviously we couldn't have, we had at one point 125 guest attendees on the meeting tonight. And if we were in person in that room at Berkshire Hills, we couldn't have that kind of participation. So there are some benefits to this Zoom format in that we can really increase public participation and engagement. All right, I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, who made the motion? Was that George?
Yes.
Okay, and who was the second, Susan?
Deb.
Oh, Deb, thank you. All right, Roll call vote, Charlie,
Yes.
Lucy, yes, George,
Yeah.
Tom Burkle,
Aye.
Danelle, Steve Bannon,
Yes.
Deb Phillips,
Yes.
Peter Taylor,
Yes.
Don Coburn, John Silbert, Laura Rodriguez,
Yes.
Jane Burke,
Yes.
Tara White,
Yes.
Susan Smith,
Yes.
Bonnie Silvers,
Yes.
Nadine,
Yes.
Colin,
Yes.
Patrick, Roger,
Yes.
Marie,
Yes.
Molly.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for your
Dawn
patience
says yes.
tonight.
Thank you. Great presentation. Thank you.
Good job, Jake.
Thanks
Thank-
all. Thanks, Jake.
Thanks, Jake.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jake.
Good night, all. Thank you.
Thanks, Jake.